All right. Hello, everyone. I am Jules Hanisee. I'm coming at y'all for a Lofi Poli Sci's 3-year anniversary episode. I'm a former student of Professor Pickering, and I'm honored, excited, stoked, all of that for today's episode. Thank you so much, Professor Pickering, for having me today. Today's going to be a little bit of a get to know the mastermind behind Lofi Poli Sci. And Professor Pickering, how does it feel to be here on this 3-year anniversary?
I don't know. It feels weird. It feels weird being interviewed. I've I've had people on the show before, but not like this. Like I'm always asking them questions or talking them through things. So being on here for 3 years, it's kind of nerve-wracking. But I do love it because I wanted to do something different for the 3-year anniversary. Like we did something for the 2nd-year anniversary and for the 1-year anniversary, but nothing ever like this. So this is extremely exciting for me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many episodes are we looking at here?
Today makes episode 23 of season 7, but out of the entire series, it's episode 643.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, great. Do you remember the first episode that you ever recorded? Do you remember like that process of kind of like diving into it for the first time?
Not really. No, that was so that was 3 years ago, and that was March 18th, 2020. So COVID, we had all just started virtual classes for COVID, and all I kind of remember is just deciding to talk about news and do a podcast and send it to my students. And I've like vaguely remember the last story was something about a chicken or a wonder chicken. And like I've gone back and listened to it a couple times. It's a horrible episode. It really is. I can't stand that episode at all. And I always tell people whenever I think about it, it's like, don't go back and listen to it. It's ridiculous. And I've even come very, very close to deleting it off of everywhere. But I kind of feel like that would be like cheating, you know? It's there. So yeah, I remember it, but I don't remember everything about it. I think I even talked about what was it? US primary elections for the Democratic race. Like I seem to remember talking about Pete
Oh,
Buttigieg
yeah.
or something like that. And like I never talk about US domestic politics anymore. So it was weird. It was very weird.
Yeah, for sure. So did you kind of go into the podcast looking at making it specifically for your students?
Yeah, without doubt. I At first I really didn't even care about other people. Like I didn't even ever expect anyone else except for my students to listen to it. And in fact, I completely understood that most of my students would never listen to it, no matter what I did. But in some ways, I just felt like it was something I wanted to do for them and like to keep everyone plugged in. So yeah, it was definitely just originally aimed for them. The only reason I put it on podcast apps and YouTube is because I've always been like a big proponent of if you're going to do something extra technology wise for students, then you should use platforms that they use if you want them to interact with it.
Hmm.
So like if I tried to get everyone to listen to it on some like school sponsored, like a Canvas or a Moodle or something like that, or a Blackboard, like students don't regularly interact with that kind of stuff. But if I give it to them on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, chances are they have at least one or two of those apps, if not all of them. So they'll be more likely to interact with it on those apps. But as a byproduct of putting it out there on my students' platforms, the rest of the world could hear it too. So that's the only
Right.
reason why it's out public.
So how do you, seeing as you've been doing this for 3 years, how do you keep things fresh with your podcast? How do you stay engaged with it? And I know you do a lot of like trivia episodes, switching it up a little bit there. But how do you stay feeling like the podcast is like refreshing and renewing to you?
That's a good question because the assumption is that it is new and fresh, right?
Right.
So, like, I hope I achieve that, but I never know for certain if I do.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's kind of one reason why I do break it off into seasons. And so, a season is approximately one semester. Like, the spring season is long, it goes from January to August, and the fall season is short, August to December. Uh, So every season, I always change something up. Like the first thing I change up is the music. That way, there's some different intro music bringing us into the show. For students who take me multiple times, I want them listening to different stuff to get a different feel. And also for myself, like I need to get myself in a different frame of mind. And episode art, I always change that too every season to try and add different aspects to it. I get a lot of input from people. I always ask people, do you like this music or do you like this episode artwork? Or like I ask for quite a few opinions around the board. Well, not a whole lot, but like specific people I ask for opinions. And then I always try to change platforms, like 5 days a week versus 3 days a week versus long form. Like at this time last year, I did a long form Monday show that was about 45 to 50 minutes. That was like a completely different beast of a podcast.
Right.
And I will never, ever do that again. Like Lofi Poli Sci was always supposed to be short and sweet. But I do change it every semester. And, sometimes we have like Good News Fridays, or sometimes we have Messy Mondays, or sometimes we have like regional news shows. We have game shows. So yeah, I try to do different episode themes to vary stuff up, different music, different EP art. And then also, like, even the way I speak has changed. And I try to actively change it at least a little bit every season. And I don't think people who are with me multiple seasons in a row, I don't think I switch it enough to where it's jarring and they notice it.
Mhm.
But it's enough for me to notice it, I think, and just to keep me with a different feel.
Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to your podcast all throughout last semester as your student. And definitely continuing to listen to it this semester.
Oh, don't
Definitely.
even lie. Don't lie. I always tell people after they leave my class, I'm like, do not even pretend to tell me that you still listen. I don't offend me. Um,
See, and I do
uh,
listen. I listen to it in definitely different eyes. Listening to it and not having to like write down what you're saying has been
right.
really interesting. Because I remember listening to it for the first time when I was taking your class, and I guess I didn't listen to it well enough. And the pop quiz kind of took me out kind of out of nowhere. And so I was like, okay, now is my time to start writing down what Professor Pickering is saying. And I guess kind of stopping doing that and listening to it now has been really interesting. And I remember from the first semester of this year, I listened to one of your episodes that stuck with me for whatever reason, and it was when you were ranking all of your favorite foods. Um,
Oh, goodness.
and I was wondering, just off that beat, since you had an episode of your favorite foods, what would be, if you had to choose, what would be your very last meal?
Oh, that's so like, if you're on death row, what are you going to eat, right? That's a horrible
Exactly.
and awesome question. The last thing I would eat? I don't know. I don't know if I would like eat anything. I would maybe ask for like a smoothie or something because whatever I would eat, it would never be good enough because if I knew it was lasting, I'd get to the end and I'd be like, why did I choose this? So I'd be like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if I could choose something like that because I always like to say like I don't have a favorite anything. I have number twos and I have multiple number twos, but I always leave number one blank because there's always something better out there.
So would you prefer to drink a smoothie rather than have like this weird mix up of favorite foods that you wouldn't necessarily eat together on a different occasion, but you kind of had to this time because it's your last meal?
All right. Well, then in that case, maybe like I've always been a huge fan of mixing Italian cuisine with Cajun cuisine, and in particular, shrimp fettuccine Alfredo. So it's
Okay.
a white Alfredo sauce with noodles and shrimp, but you boil the shrimp in Cajun seasoning first. So it adds like a real Cajun kind of Creole flair to the Alfredo, and it's amazing. It's so good, but it's
Yeah.
incredibly horrible for you. But I think maybe that would be yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good answer. So a few students wrote in with some questions that I thought really stuck with me. One of them was just something that I've honestly been asking a lot of people lately, so I was happy that someone else wrote in. If you could go back and tell your undergraduate college self something that would be helpful for your present self, or just something that would have been helpful in college, just to hear or to learn from, what would it be? Slash, if you have multiple, definitely feel free to give me all of them. But
So this is it's a really hard one, right? Because like part of the answer I can't give you, not on air. Like it's there's some, well, I suppose most of you who are listening to this are in college, so you know what goes on in college. And there are some things that we're not going to talk about my past on air. And
right.
so there's some things I would definitely go back and tell myself and be like, look, you should probably not do that. And other than that, maybe, I don't know, study more. Although I think I did pretty well. Keep in touch with friends. I would say keep in touch with friends. I like to stress to people, like the people you meet in undergrad, they can be lifelong friends if you keep in touch with them. And some of mine I have still kept in touch with. Others I wish I would have done better with, because you share a unique experience that no one else in your life, family or friend that you grew up with, but no one else in your life has experienced. Like when you're out in college and you meet people that are university students just like you, and you start a life together, the things you experience are so singular to what you are doing. And after they're gone 4 or 5 years, like that's it. Only those people know who you are in that capacity. And keeping with those people, like it matters. You see each other, you talk to each other, and you're instantly drawn back to that time and place, but also you get to be a part of who you are that only they understand because they were actually there for it. So I would say stay in touch with your people that you go to school with in
Yeah.
university. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
unless you don't like friends and stuff, then no, who cares? Just be antisocial and don't talk to anyone.
Oh, of
Um,
course. Yeah. I when you said that, to stay in touch with the people in your life, even when they're not so super close with you, the best piece of advice, I mean, maybe not advice, but just something someone told me when I was graduating high school was like, yes, siblings are kind of like very important no matter what, because you kind of can't really get away from family. But I remember listening to someone tell me that your siblings are your greatest link to your past and your life in general. And I don't know, it kind of reframes my relationship with my brother. I have a twin brother. And I don't know, just yeah, when you said to keep in touch, like that has genuinely been the most important thing in my life, is after hearing that, staying in touch with my brother, and having a link to my past that nobody else here really gets. And is being from New Mexico, nobody gets that either. So I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
of course, of course.
So this was something I was wondering, honestly, months ago, when I was in your class and we kind of had the opportunity to connect over music. I love it when people ask
Mm.
me this question. Is there a song that you know every single lyric to and could consistently know every single lyric to, for a long time?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few, quite a few. Uh, I'd say the ones that pop off to my head, like the quickest, probably be Linoleum by NoFX. That means a whole lot. The Decline by NoFX. It's like an 18-minute song where I know almost all the words. Um, there's some Rancid songs that I know by heart, some Less Than Jake that I know by heart, probably an entire album by Less Than Jake I know by heart. Real Big Fish, um, some Common, some Jurassic 5, There's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to say when it was because that clues people into a different thing, but hip hop and punk and ska, like all intermixed in this weird kind of culture. Like I grew up in the punk scene. And so all three of those were always meshed together. And music was just like a way of life. We had our music and we had our skateboards and we sang while we skate. And that's what we did. And so, yeah, there's a lot of music out there that's punk, ska, and hip hop that I still remember all the words to.
Yeah. Do you listen to a lot of the same music that you listened to sort of growing up? I mean, maybe the same genres, but have you had songs just kind of stick with you?
So I do switch it up. It depends on what I'm doing. I do like still on occasions, like right now lately, and actually because of you and last semester, I got on a punk rock kick, and I've like been back with a lot of punk as of late, and with some driblets of ska, and like I've been going through. I actually have 3 CDs in my office right now. One is Blink 182, one's Less Than Jake, and one is Green Day. And I've listened to Less Than Jake and Blink 182, and Green Day's next up. So I've gone back to that, but also I get friends of mine to make a lot of playlists for me, and I listen to what other people listen to because I don't always have time to go out and search new stuff. Like I get music from you, you send me stuff. What else? Oh, and then of course, like I listen to a ton of lo-fi music. So it's like a lot of times when I'm in my office or even if I'm at home at work, I listen to lo-fi music because there's no words, there's nothing for me to sing along with, but there's like a beat that's going on that's keeping me going with whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Transitioning, I guess, from music to books, I've been reading a ton this semester. It just I kind of go through phases of like reading so much every day to not reading for months. But right now I'm in my reading a lot phase, and I was wondering if you think there's a book that every person ever should read. Why? When did you read it? Etc.
No, just shut that one down for you. No, I don't. I think for the longest time, and I know this person actually listens, so they'll be listening to this too. I used to make fun of a certain friend of mine for reading, and this goes before I became an academic. But I would say books are ridiculous. Books are only written because people wanted to make movies, but they couldn't, so they just wrote a book. I used to detest reading, and now of course I read a ton. Like granted, I don't read recreationally because I read so much and I read so many different kinds of things. But I do have some books that I really like, but I haven't read them in a very long time, or I haven't even finished them. And I think reading is so personalized. Like, there's no way whatever I like, I think everyone else should read. Like, my favorite book is probably by J.R.R. Tolkien called The Silmarillion, and it's the beginning anthology of the worlds of like the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. But it's like it's a massive collection of a whole bunch of different stories, but it's really really long, and some of it's like a genealogy, and it's more like a history book, and it's just it is not for everyone at all, like
Yeah.
really. But it's my favorite book. But then again, I haven't read it in forever, so no, I don't think there's a book out there for everybody that everyone should read.
Okay. Yeah. Um, Kind of going back to the podcast, this was also a write-in. Do you have an episode that was the hardest for you to make? And why was it difficult?
Hmm. See, now I'm gonna have to decide if I'm like gonna edit this quiet time out in post production or not. And I always make jokes in class about like comfortable silence, how I love a comfortable silence. But this is a hard question. I think there's definitely one that comes to mind right away. And it was last summer after Roe v. Wade got overturned. It
Yeah.
was a it was a difficult episode because I always for all of my classes and for the podcast in general, especially since I focus on international affairs, like outside of human rights, gender rights, and a few other things, like you would never know what I believe. Like you never. I have some people who've taken 5 classes with me who've known me for years and years, and they still have no idea what kind of political ideology I have. And that's kind of the point of my approach to everything I do that interacts with people. Like, my business is my business, but like sometimes I can't help myself.
Hmm.
And so that episode, it was extremely brief, very, very brief. It was really just like a couple statements. And then that was it. It was a hard one because I had to decide like if I was going to say something or not at all. Because part of the issue was anytime I do take a stand, it alienates people by default. Because if you take a stand, there's automatically people who are standing opposite of you. And I always believe that the best way to move forward is a conversation with everyone. And so like if you're standing against someone, then how can you converse with them to move forward? So that was, yeah, I think that episode was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest, and probably one of the shortest, if ever. I don't know if I can really even think of a harder one.
Yeah, no, just hearing you say that, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, I'm trying to go into advocacy fields as like in my professional life. And it's been really interesting trying to figure out what is the best environment to be saying what I truly believe and what's the best environment to not really not really be saying opinions, and just navigating like what will let me feel like I did the most good in that situation. Yeah, and it changes so much.
It really does
Um,
because
yeah,
you change with the people around you. Like they react to what you say, and then you react to the reaction. And really what you're realizing is, or at least for me, what I realized is I was actually reacting to myself. And that's an odd kind of feeling whenever you have to really look inward and decide like, okay, who am I? And is this really who I want to be?
yeah,
Like, am I comfortable in my own skin, basically?
yeah. No, that is such a big part, I think. From I've been to a bunch of different like conferences over the past few months and just interacted with a lot of wonderful students and professors and professionals, and so much of the work that I've been doing has centered around like, do I feel comfortable with myself, I guess, in this profession? And do I feel comfortable talking to this person? And so many of the people have said, like, if you don't feel comfortable with it, like, what are you going to get done? Like, it's really, I don't know. It's just kind of stuck with me, like thinking about how so much of how you view the world and how you view your work is sort of a product-ish, for lack of a better word, on how you view yourself. Yeah, yeah, I guess I could say more, but I
No,
won't.
I
I won't
get you. I get you.
your interview.
I
Yeah,
do. I feel you.
yeah. So, I guess I sort of have uh one more question. I guess it's multiple questions, but it all kind of goes into the realm of what is next for Lofi Poli Sci. Not that you have to have an answer, um, but just something I guess that I've been thinking about. Um, A, do you foresee continuing Lo-Fi Poli-Sci for a long time? And B, what are you most proud of yourself for in Lo-Fi Poli-Sci? And that does sort of go along with what we were just talking about, is how you view yourself. What is some like a positive accomplishment that you really value in yourself with Lo-Fi?
So I don't have an answer for like, will this go on forever? I really don't. I like we started for a very specific reason, and at every turn, every time we start a new season, we have a continuing reason. Like, and the reason has changed, but all I can say is we go as long as there is reason to go. I can't see going forward if there is no reason to go forward, if that makes sense. Like, lo-fi poli-sci always has to have a purpose. Um, because if there is no purpose, then what are we doing?
Right.
So as long as there is purpose, I think we'll keep going. Um, how it'll look in the future. We'll obviously have new music here and there. And actually, I need to get on making some new lo-fi tracks and make a new like lo-fi study beat. New episode art, of course, new show formats. I would like to do lots of more interviews. I'd like to do lots more live shows. There are lots of other things I do want to do, but it's time consuming. It is way, way, way time consuming. And I only have so much time. So, but like, I don't know, we'll keep going for sure. And what was the other part?
It was what are you proud of yourself? What's an accomplishment that you that kind of resonates with you and that you think about a lot, I guess. Any way that you want to interpret it is fine. Just basically the lines of what are you proud of in lo-fi?
Connecting to people, definitely. Because that's the whole point. And that was originally the whole point, is to keep connected to my people in the middle of a world that was tearing us apart. And so anytime someone from back in the day reconnects, that's like, oh, or new connections, like I love new connections. Whenever, basically what it means is like write-ins. When someone who is listening to the show, because I say write in quite a bit in the show, because I always want people to write in, it's like interacting, like this is me talking to everyone. And so like whenever someone actually does, it means that like we're forming a connection and I'm reaching someone, and it's not just me screaming out into the void on a soapbox with a podcast microphone. It's actually us as human beings talking. And so I don't know, I really like the idea that you can connect to people through a podcast. It's strange. It's so strange. And it's not something I ever would have imagined myself doing. And yet here we are,
Here we
connecting through
are.
a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think I would have given a very similar answer if I were asked that, just honestly with any of the work that I feel proud of. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever been interviewed like in the podcast. And I was like, oh, do I really want to do this? I was like, yeah, I do kind of want to do this because we've done other kinds of stuff before. And so I wanted it to be something different. And this next statement is going to kind of go against what you were about to go into earlier about when someone was saying, if you don't feel comfortable in something, then what are you doing? I kind of believe the opposite. If you get too comfortable in a thing, then what are you doing? And so like for me, it's the push to kind of stay uncomfortable. That way, like you have room to grow. So it's like having the idea that me being interviewed had me kind of like on my heels, and I was like, oh, do I really want to do this? That made me think like, yes, you do want to do this. That's why you feel uneasy about it, because you haven't done it before. So try something new. And so thank you for actually doing it for me. I really, really appreciate that. I can't say that enough. And hopefully you will come back on the cast again sometime, and maybe not interview, but maybe in some other kind of capacity.
Yeah, I am available whenever Lofi Poli Sci calls.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And then I also thought about like how to end the show, and like inevitably there's almost one thing that's always been like a through line, and that's been the outro of the show. Like the outro music has always been the same. Intro music changes, but the outro music's always the same. But then every so often, like there's just a cold outro, and the outro has been the outro for a very long time, with an occasional new addition to it that came last season, and I really do like it. And it's the idea that it's not a cliche or a catchphrase. It's a lifestyle. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Talk to you soon, Lofi listeners. Jules and Pickering, signing off.